Hey, what is up? My name is Hillary. Welcome to my YouTube channel and thank you for joining me for this video. I'm gonna go through some of my anticipated releases for 2026. It's kind of hard for me to remember all the details and get things straight, but I'm gonna do my best here to talk a little bit about some of my most anticipated releases, and then I'm also gonna do sort of a rapid fire things that have caught my eye and are on my radar, but I know less about the author and things like that. There's about 43 books on my radar. That is so many. I'm so intrigued by so many books, and reading through these synopses, there were just so many things that sounded really interesting to me, and honestly, I probably will give a lot of them a shot. Now, I have no shame in DNFing a book if it's not working for me, and then I don't feel like my time is wasted for having maybe taken a chance on an author I've never read before, or a book that has very few reviews and things like that. And that's kind of why I want to maybe go a little bit more in depth with the ones that I'm most anticipating, because maybe the author had a book on my top books of 2025, or it's a sequel in a series that I've started, or maybe it's the last book in a series that I've read. I'll talk more in depth about those just because I probably know a little bit more about those, and the ones that are just kind of on my radar, again, are going to be a little bit rapid fire. One thing that I try to do is to diversify my reads, and so I try to make sure I'm reading queer and or BIPOC stories, and that could mean that the author is queer and or BIPOC, or the characters are. So out of this list of about 43, 44, I might have lost count, books that I'm going to go through, only 11 of them do not have queer or BIPOC representation of some kind, as far as I can tell. Let's go ahead and dive into the books that I am most anticipating in 2026. Okay, the first book that I am going to talk about is Big Girl Blitz by Danielle Allen, coming out April 14th. This is the third book in the Curve series. The first book in that series is Curvy Girl Summer, which did make my top books of 2025. This book is going to be featuring Jasmine as the main female character. Throughout this series, we are following a friend group. In each of the books, a different person in the friend group is the main female character. This time we get Jasmine. Another feature of this series in each of the books is that they are curvy girls. That's why the series is called Curve. And so there's great plus size representation, and also often instances where the main characters are sort of fighting against fat phobia in one form or another. It seems like this one will be no different, because in the synopsis it actually says Jasmine fled her hometown because of the fat phobes who made her life hell. So I'm really looking forward to this one. All of these books are a really fun read. And also I love the way that the characters handle fat phobia and go through life with so much confidence. It really inspires me as a plus size woman to carry myself with the same confidence that these characters do. So next we have The Ballad of Falling Dragons by Sarah A. Parker. This is the second book in the Moonfall series, following after When the Moon Hatched. When the Moon Hatched did make my top books of 2025, and that was even a reread. I really love that book, and I'm so curious to see where the author takes the series. Based on what all was introduced in the first book, I could see it going in so many different directions. She created such an expansive world, so many different characters, different kingdoms within the world. So I feel like there's so many places it could go, and I just really am curious to find out where we're gonna be, who we're gonna spend most of our time with. I'm wondering if it might not be the main character of the first book that we spend the most time with in this book, but I could be wrong. I will be reading it whenever it comes out. The next one is Score by Kennedy Ryan. This is book 2 in the Hollywood Renaissance series. The first book was Real. Real made my top books of 2025. Such a beautiful love story between a actress and a director who are creating a biopic about a woman from 1930s Jazz Age Renaissance. In that book, we met Verity and Monk. Verity is a screenwriter and Monk is a musician creating scores for the film. And this book is going to be about those two characters. So I'm really excited to see more of their dynamic. If I remember correctly, they seemed like sort of a grumpy sunshine dynamic. I also think I maybe remember that they knew each other or maybe had dated before, so maybe there's a second chance aspect to this. Okay, so this is a second chance romance. Apparently they were each other's first loves. So I was remembering correctly. That does give me hope that I remembered enough details about real to, jump right into this whenever it comes out, which it seems like will be May 19th. And I have already pre-ordered this one. Absolutely thrilled for that to drop into my Libro FM. Next, we have The Misconnection by Tia Williams. On my top books of 2025, I had A Love Song for Ricky Wilde by Tia Williams. I can't wait to pick this one up. I don't know a ton about it, but based on the synopsis that I read, it seems like maybe our main female character is a matchmaker of sorts, and she herself is not super interested in dating, but then she meets someone on her flight to Europe who sits next to her, and they end up having a connection. It sort of seems like they maybe get along on this flight, and she's thinking that there might be something really here between them, and somehow leave the airport, and then she wishes that she had gotten his information because she's feeling like it's a soulmate connection. So that sounds really cute to me. I love a good meet cute on a long international flight. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what Tia Williams does in this one. Next, we have the 6th and final volume of the Heartstopper graphic novel series. If you haven't heard of this, you should definitely check it out. It is so adorable, so sweet. It mainly covers the love story between Nick and Charlie, who are high school students. Charlie is openly gay, but Nick starts to fall for Charlie even though he's actually never fallen for a boy before, and so he starts to question his sexuality. And in addition to Nick and Charlie, there's a whole range of queer representation, every color of the rainbow, and I just love the way that this series handles pretty serious topics that teenagers are often dealing with and don't have a resource for or an example to look to. It gives me hope that maybe they can look to this series for how to handle some really tough things that happen in teenage years. I am feeling both excited and sad, so I guess a little bittersweet about this release because I am not ready for the series to be over. I imagine once the 6th book comes out, we will start hearing about maybe a release date for the movie that's supposed to cover the 6th book. So I'm not ready for that to be over. I love this series so much. If you haven't read the graphic novels or you haven't watched the TV show, highly recommend both. They are absolutely beautifully done. Next, we have Lost and Found by Tarah Dewitt. This is the 3rd book in the Spoon series. The first book was Savor It, and then the second book, Left of Forever, did make my top books of 2025. This book is going to be focusing on Bee and Silas. It seems like Bee and Silas are longtime friends. Silas is one of the firefighters in the area, so in the second book we did meet some of the firefighters. I'm guessing that this might have been one of the characters who was friends with the male main character in Left of Forever, but I don't remember for sure. It seems like Bee is really wanting to be a mom. She maybe goes through an egg donor and for some reason ends up without a place to live, and Silas offers for her to stay with him, and we can guess where it goes from there. Next up, we have Us Defiant Few by Alexis Patton. This is the 3rd book in the Us Dark Few series. I read the first 2 books in this series in anticipation of going to Romantasy BookCon this year. Alexis Patton was there, and I did get to talk to her a little bit. Since then, her books have been picked up for traditional publishing. So in the coming months, the 1st and 2nd books are going to be re-released traditionally. And then in September, we will have the 3rd book released traditionally. I'm really excited for this one. This is just a really fun series. It is a dystopian romantasy. The first book takes place in an underground prison, and we find out that they are living below a domed city that had to be created because of some kind of disaster with the Earth's atmosphere. People had to go underground to continue living. There was a lot of crop failure and radiation and things like that. So it's sort of a post-apocalyptic situation, and our main character, Kalani, is actually a prisoner in this underground prison. Book 1 was very fun, and there was a really great twist near the end of that book that kind of blew my mind. The messages that this story includes are great messages and very relevant to our current times and are definitely worth checking out. And then you only have to wait till September for the 3rd book. The final book in this first sort of subgroup of my anticipated releases is The Wretched Divine by Adalyn Grace. Adalyn Grace wrote the Belladonna series, which I absolutely loved and devoured. Now, that was a YA series, and it was definitely romantasy. This series is high fantasy and adult. So if she was able to do what she did with the Belladonna series in a YA world, I can't wait to see what she comes up with for an adult world. I heard her speak at Romantasy BookCon, and she seemed so excited for it. She said this is one of her favorite things that she's ever written, and that she was largely inspired by people like Brandon Sanderson, well-known names in the high fantasy world. So I can't wait to see what she comes up with. This one comes out in October, so we've got a bit of a wait ahead of us. We don't have a cover for this one yet, but I am definitely going to be pre-ordering this one so I can get my hands on it as soon as it comes out. Based on a quick look at the synopsis, it seems like we've got a paranormal story here. We're dealing with demons and angels. It seems that Orly is the main female character who is a knight battling monsters. It's very much giving everything that I would love to read. It seems Orly and maybe some other characters get together to try to find a cure that will turn demons back to humans. So that all sounds very, very interesting to me. Again, can't wait to see what Adalyn Grace does with this one. Is This a Cry for Help by Emily R. Austin. I have read Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by this same author, and then I own Interesting Facts About Space. From what I know, this author always includes queer representation in their books, quirky, kind of weird main characters that are actually quite relatable, in my opinion. It seems this one might be dealing with some quite heavy topics like a mental breakdown and having to take medical leave from work, experiencing unrest in her community, things like protests and the dismantling of DEI. So quite relevant to our current times. I always appreciate mental health representation, especially when it comes to handling current events and the way that certain things are being handled right now. So I'm really glad to see that we've got a book about mental health and grief and things like that related to some of these current events. Next, we have Half City by Kate Golden that will be published in February. I read the Sacred Stones trilogy by this author, I believe in 2024 maybe, and really enjoyed that. I thought it was beginner, intermediate level fantasy. It was a really easy to follow magic system and world. Because of that, I was able to have a really fun time and kind of dive deep into the characters and their personality traits and things like that. So that's one of the reasons why I would love to start this new series. It looks like it will be called Parker Academy. We've got some dark academia, urban fantasy elements to this series. Our main character Viv is on what they call the Deviant Defense. She's a demon hunter who falls for a demon. Uh-oh, whoops. It also says in the synopsis that Viv has a deep secret that no one can know. So all of these elements are building to something that just sounds incredible to me. Another book coming out in February is And Now Back to You by BK Borison. This is the second book in the Heartstrings series. So the first book was First Time Caller. In First Time Caller, we did meet Jackson and Delilah. Delilah is a journalist and Jackson is a meteorologist, and those are our main characters for this next book in the series. From what I remember in First Time Caller, Jackson and Delilah didn't necessarily get along. I feel like I remember them fighting, but at the same time, we were getting tension, and I think it was pretty obvious that they were going to be the main characters of the next story based on how it was set up in the first book. So I'm really excited to see where their relationship goes. I really enjoyed First Time Caller, and I think one of my favorite things about that romance specifically was how well the two communicated with each other. So I'm very excited to see if BK Borison can continue to create interesting and unique couple dynamics that still involve good communication. I feel like we need more examples of good communication in contemporary romance. Next, we have Starshipped by Cat Sebastian, coming out in March. I have read one book by Cat Sebastian in the past, We Could Be So Lucky. As far as I know, Cat Sebastian often writes sort of a historical romance involving queer characters, but set in a time when maybe being queer wasn't as accepted. And so that's usually a part of the narrative, is the characters having to find ways to be together and feel safe with each other given their current environment. Now this one, the synopsis does say it's a contemporary romance. This is an MM romance, and the two main characters are Simon and Charlie, who are actors on a long-running sci-fi show together. This definitely sounds like we've got a little bit of a grumpy sunshine. It seems Simon might be the grumpy side of things. He's really hard to work with, as opposed to Charlie, who gets along with everyone. But in general, over the 7 years that they've worked on the show together, they have become very close. They know each other pretty well, and it seems that something develops from that friendship. So let's see how Sebastian does with a contemporary romance. Another book coming out in March is Mayhem and the Mortal by Shanora Williams. Now, I have read the first book in her Tether trilogy, the first book being Vicious Bonds, and had a really great time. I thought the writing was fantastic, in addition to it being a pretty cool world and magic system that she had created. So I believe this one is a standalone, and I'm really excited to see how this author does with standalone world building and relationship dynamics. This is a romantasy involving magic and vicious creatures that eat people alive, according to the synopsis. The main female character, Zyra, works with a very talented sorcerer named Thane to go on a mission to kill these vicious creatures. I have actually already pre-ordered this one. Next up is You Did Nothing Wrong by C.G. Drews. So this book is on my list because I loved Don't Let the Forest In. It was one of my top books of 2025. However, this one is an adult horror novel. I don't read horror very often. I have been, trying to get into it a little bit more in the last year or so. I haven't quite figured out what type of horror I enjoy versus not. So I'm definitely going to give this one a try. I am feeling a little bit cautious about it though, just because it does seem quite creepy from the synopsis. Like, we've got a single mother who just bought a house and is moving in with her autistic son. And the son tells her that he can hear voices in the walls. Now that already scares me. They're doing renovations on the house, and the kid is saying that the voices are telling him that they're hurting the house. The synopsis also says it's a pulse-pounding, clever take on a haunted house. So that both intrigues me and scares me. Pulse-pounding. Now, one of the things that I love about C.G. Drews, at this point I've read 2 books by this author, is the way that they write and the way that they describe things. So for those reasons, I'm definitely going to give it a shot, but we'll see. We will find out if it is too scary for me or not. Next, we have First to Finish by Rebecca Caffery. This is the second book in the Pole Position series. So as the series is titled, the first book was Pole Position, which is one of my absolute favorite male sports romances. I think F1 counts as sports in the contemporary romance world. So it looks like this is another male romance between one of the drivers and one of the engineers on their team. So when I read Pole Position, one of the things that I loved is the way that they communicated with each other, but also provided emotional support even before they were officially together. They were kind of posed by everyone else as enemies or rivals. Even though they were on the same team, it was sort of an older driver with this new kid coming in, and he was maybe a little bit resentful of the new kid coming in and him being so young and fresh and, not having learned all the skills that he did because he was older. So it did kind of start off like that, but pretty quickly they started sharing things about themselves with each other, and I thought the author handled it so well. So I really hope some of those elements are brought into this book as well. Believe it or not, we are still on books that are coming out in March. Next, we have The Night We Met by Abby Jimenez. This is the second book in the series, Say You'll Remember Me. So obviously the first book was Say You'll Remember Me, which I know that one had a lot of mixed reviews. I really liked it. I know for some people it was maybe too sad or mentioning too many real things, and it didn't feel, a light, fluffy contemporary romance. I would argue none of the Abby Jimenez books that I have read are light and fluffy contemporary romance. She always involves something kind of serious and even a little bit heavy in her romance books. The characters are dealing with something pretty bad. Like in one of her books, the main character's brother has kidney disease and she has to take care of him. In another one, their parent has Alzheimer's. In another one, she has an emotionally abusive ex-husband. So these are not light topics. So now I know to go into them prepared for that kind of thing, because I do think that there is a place for that. Let's see what this one's going to be about. This one involves Larissa and Chris. I don't know who those characters are. I don't remember if we met them in the first book. We probably did. It seems this might be a friends to lovers story. You know, we will find out what Abby Jimenez has in store for us. Speaking of so many other books, in March we have Game On by Navessa Allen. This is the third book in the Into Darkness series that started with Lights Out. So many people really loved Lights Out. It was sort of a lighter, dark rom-com. It was quite funny. The main character was endearing in his own ways. The second book caught up. I think people had mixed feelings about. I personally loved it. It did make my top books of 2025. So I can't wait to see where we go in this next book. We're going to be focusing on Tyler, who was Josh's roommate in Lights Out, and who was sprinkled throughout Caught Up. We heard brief mentions of Tyler, I think maybe having to do with the club that they bought. Hot brat play. I just read the synopsis, and this is just one line. The game is on for these enemies to lovers with laugh out loud banter and scorching hot brat play. I can't wait to find out what brat play is. I feel like Navessa Allen's books attract a lot of people who don't typically read dark romance, and so the kinks that she brings into her books, some people are learning about for the first time, and I feel like she introduces them in a very approachable way so that we can sort of, I'm saying we because I am one of those people, we can sort of expand our horizons and learn new things and, you know, maybe be exposed to some things that people who read dark romance regularly might know a little bit more about than I do, or people who aren't typically reading dark romance. In 2026, we have a new book and a new beginning of a series by Veronica Roth. Veronica Roth was the one who wrote the Divergent series, if you may have read that. I know a lot of people who enjoyed The Hunger Games also enjoyed Divergent. And another series that I read by Veronica Roth was the Curse Bearer series, which started with When Among Crows. That was fantastic. They're short, quick little fantasy novellas. So Seek the Traitor's Son, a new epic romantic dystopian fantasy. That is quite a mouthful. Epic romantic dystopian fantasy. Amazing. Also, this is an adult series, not YA like Divergent was. Another thing I love about Veronica Roth is that she is from Chicago and often will include Chicago in some way in her series. Now, I don't know if that will happen in this one, if we're in some sort of fantasy world. That is just always a little bit of an Easter egg whenever I read her books. This one seems very political. The main character is a soldier defending their country. There's a fever that blesses people with mysterious gifts of favor. And there's a prophecy involved. So I already know I'm definitely checking this one out. In July 2026, we are getting a new Christina Lauren. This is very exciting. I think I've read most Christina Lauren books. My favorite being Love and Other Words. I think I've given everything of theirs at least a 3.5. They're always a very fun time. So this one is called The Romance Revival, and it definitely seems like more of a rom-com, which is great. We could all use some comedy these days, right? Oh, we've got Amnesia. Okay, so this seems like a second chance romance, but involving an amnesia trope. One of the characters forgets how they met and their romance, and so they have a chance to have a do-over. That could be cute. We'll see how they handle the amnesia trope. I'm not always the biggest fan of that, but it's not going to stop me from checking this one out from the library. Another one on July 14th, we have The Dragon Has Some Complaints by John Wiswell. Now, John Wiswell wrote Someone You Can Build a Nest In, which I shockingly loved. I say shockingly because that one was like a cozy horror fantasy, and like I just said earlier, I don't tend to like horror. That one was so cute. It had sapphic representation, feminist themes throughout. I remember we read that book for a book club meeting, and at the meeting we were like, this was written by a white man? It was such a fun time. It was a really great book, and so I feel like I'm always going to be curious to at least check out John Wiswell's future books, and this one is no exception. Obviously, based on the title and the cover of the book, this very heavily involves dragons, maybe even as the main characters. This one is categorized as cozy. For this one, I will give it a shot. I will see. Sometimes the cozies do it for me. Most of the time they don't. I guess I just like steaks. I'm kind of looking at the illustration on the cover and then reading the description. It seems like the dragons might be like kind of grumpy or like have funny personalities, and that could be really fun. All right, we have been talking for quite a while, and I still have so many more books that I'm interested in, but these I generally know less about. I'm not familiar with the authors, or I'm a lot less familiar with these authors, so I'm just gonna go a little bit rapid fire through these. The first one is going to be Skate It Till You Make It. This seems to be a hockey rom-com. The main female character is a hockey player and the main male character is a photographer. I actually requested the advanced listener copy on NetGalley for this one, so we'll see if I end up getting that. The next one is Where the Wildflowers Grow. Now, I read One Summer in Savannah by this author. I didn't love the premise of that book, but I did enjoy the writing. I thought the writing was really beautiful, and this author is able to handle some heavier topics very well, or at least did in that book. So I really want to check this one out. It seems like there are definitely some heavy themes involved in the synopsis of this one, and there are some historical aspects to the story and maybe even a little bit of a mystery. Next we have Queen of Faces by Petra Lord. Now this is a YA fantasy that involves dark academia, and I believe I remember seeing that there's trans representation in this one. So I have pre-ordered this book and can't wait to get my hands on it. The cover is actually very beautiful. We have a girl at a magical academy who is an assassin, and this is kind of crazy reading the synopsis for this. It says Annabelle Gage is trapped in a male body and it's rotting from the inside out. In Kaimor, where the magical elite buy and swap designer bodies like clothes, Anna can't afford to escape her tattered form. What? That sounds so gross and also a really cool concept. Next we have The Fox and the Devil by Kirsten White. This one seems to involve some sapphic yearning. An obsession with a beautiful serial killer entangles a vampire hunter's daughter in an immortal sapphic romance in this enthralling gothic fantasy. What? So many great keywords there. I love books with vampires. That's one of my favorite sort of fantasy, paranormal creatures. So her father hunts and studies vampires. Wow, this sounds so good. Yeah. All right, next we have a sci-fi fantasy called Green and Deadly Things. And what got me in this synopsis is sort of like the intro sentences. Centuries ago, necromancy almost destroyed the world. That's how history remembers it. History remembers it wrong. The forests are coming alive and devouring anyone so foolish as to trespass. Ooh, okay, yes. Yeah, this one sounds fantastic. It sounds like it has really high stakes. I will say, I can't tell what's happening on this cover. Is that an animal? A torso? A rock? Maybe we'll find out once we read the book. Next we have Cabaret in Flames, and I don't know if you're noticing this, but we're seeing more books in March. So March is a big month this year. Now this one is set in an alternate Brazil. It says brutal flesh-hungering gulls stalk the night streets and manipulate the government from their glittering cabaret. So this seems like it definitely involves a lot of politics and maybe seedy underground environments. It says it's a novella. It involves vampires, there's queer representation, a little bit of horror. This sounds fantastic. Next we have, I'm gonna pronounce it Aisha. I hope that is at least close to correct. I didn't have to look much further than the beginning line of the synopsis on this one, which says Temptress Monster Warrior, the ultimate female rage fantasy. Say less, honestly, say less. It looks like this one might take place in Portugal and or Morocco. That's pretty cool. I love reading fantasy novels that's set in somewhere a little bit different, so this sounds great. This one does seem like war times, a rebellion is happening, and absolutely involves some historical aspects. Next we have Devil of the Deep, and I'm gonna be so for real with you, this cover is what sold me. Look at that. That is gorgeous. It does seem like maybe there was an indie cover and this is a new cover for the book. So gorgeous. Now, this is a queer fantasy involving pirates. That's fun. The first line of the synopsis says, Lou watched the love of his life walk the plank and sink into the inky black depths of the sea. Nena was dead, or so he thought. And then it sounds like maybe Nena's now like this diabolical sea creature. I love it. I really want to check this one out. I will say this one doesn't appear to have an audiobook yet. Hopefully yet is the end of that sentence. As many of you probably already know, but I'll just say I immersive read books, which means I read with my eyes and my ears at the same time. So I have some version of the book for my eyes to read while also listening to the audiobook at the same time. That's just the best way for my brain to process information. Next, we have Love by the Book. And this is so intriguing to me because it's a literary fiction novel, but it almost sounds like if a contemporary romance was about a platonic friendship. This is actually something that I have talked about before, not necessarily on this channel, just in general, that I wish there were books that could be considered contemporary romances. You know, they follow the same kind of format. Two people meet, two people slowly over time start to get to know each other and build a really lasting relationship, even if it's platonic. I really wish we could have more books like that, treated the way that romance books are, with a happily ever after, about friendships. And so anything where it seems like it might be even remotely like that, even though it's classified as literary fiction, I am absolutely going to want to read that. The intro to the synopsis on this one literally says, "Friendship is the love story you can count on." Is that not exactly what I'm talking about? I mean, we'll see if, because it's considered literary fiction, we'll find out if, you know, they have some sort of tragic event or if we actually get a happy ending. We'll see. I'm kind of guessing we do because the end of the synopsis says that the author explores the restorative nature of female friendship and the life-changing power of platonic love. Ain't that right? My female friendships are my most valued relationships in my life. I love every single one of them. I don't know who I would be if I didn't have them, so I love this so much. Next, we have The Art of Loving You by Natasha Bishop. This is the second book in the Forever Falling series. The first book was Only for the Weak, which I have not read that one yet. I am absolutely going to, though. I've heard in the first book that the woman really doesn't have much time to relax, doesn't really get many opportunities to just focus on her, and so the love interest rents her out a yacht just so she can spend the day reading on a boat. Sign me up. So I'm definitely planning on reading Only for the Week and then checking out The Art of Loving You when it comes out. Then we have Year of the Mer. Now, the opening of the synopsis for this says, "A dark, bloody, epic fantasy reimagining of The Little Mermaid that goes far beyond the fairy tale to explore family, legacy, war, and what we will sacrifice for vengeance." Ooh, for fans of The Priory of the Orange Tree and Circe. Okay. All right. Then we have Witch Queen Rising. That's really hard to say. Witch Queen Rising, which is an urban fantasy involving witches and vampires, or it seems to be set in New Orleans, which would have fantastic witchy vibes. Look at this amazing, beautiful cover. Wow. I would follow her, that's for sure. A reclusive witch who fled the burden of her bloodline rises to be the greatest among them in this lush and haunting fantasy debut. Yep, checking that one out for sure. Leave Your Mess at Home. Now, I pre-ordered this one. This sounds so good. This is a literary fiction involving a group of siblings, and it says in the synopsis that this group of siblings is botching their parents' American dream. One of them is a newly single and recently disgraced influencer. One of them is in love with their best friend who just got engaged to someone else. One of them is grappling with their sexuality and self-image. One of them is questioning their marriage. So a lot of juiciness happening here. And it seems that everyone is maybe reunited for Thanksgiving and drama ensues. This sounds like a great time, but also it does mention that we get some poignant moments and some really big questions being discussed in this one too. Take Me With You by Stephen Rowley, who I think Stephen Rowley maybe wrote The Guncle and The Celebrants. So love this author. This one seems to be a combination of literary fiction and romance with queer representation and a little bit of magical realism. Honey by Imani Thompson. Now this is another one that I've already pre-ordered because listen to this. A wickedly funny adrenaline rush of a novel about a graduate student who murders bad men and justifies it in the name of feminism. This is a contemporary thriller / horror with big themes of feminism. Sign me up. Next we have The Open Era, which is a rivals to lovers tennis romance. You know, all I'm doing is trying to fill the heated rivalry void in my heart. Maybe this will help. We'll see. Take what you can. This is another one that seems to be very focused on platonic relationships. So everything I said earlier about books focusing on platonic female friendships applies here as well. It says this explores female friendship, class, new motherhood, and independence. It seems like it could be really hard-hitting. Next we have Heir of Prophecy. This looks so great. Okay, so this author wrote Lore of the Wilds and Lore of the Tides, which I have not read yet, but they are on my shelves. I am going to get to those. This is more of a dark academia romantasy involving fae. It sounds like it's going to be a duology. I love duologies. I think duologies and trilogies are my favorite for the lengths of a series. Ooh, we've got prophecies in this one too. Okay, we need to move on. Go check it out. This one sounds great. This is quite a title. I have to read it because I'm not going to remember all these words. The Divine Gardener's Handbook, or What to Do If Your Girlfriend Accidentally Turns Off the Sun. That sounds so funny to me. I don't know, but also why this appealed to me is because in the description it says this joyful debut follows a gardener fighting to secure her dream job in the Divine Gardens, manipulating God, antagonizing her attractive rival, and running afoul of a brewing rebellion along the way. I mean, I'm a gardener, so that kind of, tugged at my heartstrings a little bit. Also, the cover is gorgeous. I love all of these colors. This says, a chaotically queer exploration of love, ambition, and toxic work culture. I don't know, it sounds like it might be a little bit of a cozy fantasy with queer representation. The Dark in Her Veins. Oddly enough, it's categorized as both adult and young adult. I don't know what that means or why it is that way, but it says a noir romantic fantasy set in a world in which sin is a fatal disease, and the rich hire the poor to carry out their basest instincts until the forbidden romance between a sinner and a mysterious figure threatens to destroy everything. She Haunts Me Still. Fantasy, horror, dark academia, vampires, lesbians. Are we seeing some themes here? These are things I love. The Inevitable Undoing of Zahara Douglas. This one seems to be a little bit of a thriller mystery / literary fiction with a historical aspect. It's actually set in 1999 when everyone was going crazy over Y2K and how it was going to mess up all of our computers and everything like that. What a wild time. It sounds like Zahara's sister disappears and no one remembers her except Zahara. And so Zahara's trying to figure out what happened to her sister and was she real? Because she sure remembers her. That sounds so interesting. Then we have Ship Happens, and I put this one on my list because it contains trans representation. It says this is an emotional second chance romance set on a breathtaking cruise where two former flames must decide whether to let go or risk it all for a love that refuses to sink. Oh, the ship metaphors. Yeah, but it's by the author of the Build a Boyfriend Project, which I've heard great things about that. The last book is Thoughts Be Bloody. This one also has trans representation. It is a fantasy, dark academia retelling of Hamlet. Let me be so honest with you. I was not the best student when I was in school. I don't remember a thing about it. I'm sure I could go look up a summary of Hamlet and be refreshed because I did read it at some point. But, this will be a whole brand new book to me. It says, a struggling student, a resident golden boy, and the curse that will bring them this queer, trans retelling is Hamlet as you've never read it before, exploring classism, identity, and the true meaning of revolution. And it's a dark academia novel. All right, this brings me to the end of my 2026 anticipated releases video. If you made it all the way through this video, I just want to say thank you so much. This was a long one. I mean, I don't know what it's going to end up being in editing, but this took me way too long to record. So thank you so much for bearing with me. Please let me know in the comments if any of these books are on your radar, or if now after watching this video, they might be on your radar. And, let's maybe figure out if we need to buddy read something in 2026. Also in the comments, let me know what you're most excited for in 2026. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.